E in your dimensional analysis packet. And before we start question E, we want to make sure that we have the correct conversion factors that we need for the question. So if you notice, question E is just a 1 unit conversion factor. It's strictly turning yards into meters. You have exactly 100 yards and you're trying to figure out how many meters is that. So the best thing for you to do is to always have your conversions visually available, and so that you have them in front of you. It may mean that you have to go back and forth between one page to another, but the part that I just circled is the most important part for you to have, because you shouldn't be walking around with these memorized. This should always be just something that's present in front of you. So let's walk through these and see which ones will help us turn yards into meters. We're trying to go from yards to meters for this question. So going through each one of them here, I have 1 meter equals 3.28 feet. I want to end up with meters, so maybe that's an option. If I look at this one right here, I have that 1 mile equals that many feet. So maybe feet will connect, but as of right now, I would be able to go from meters to miles or miles to meters. I don't really want miles involved here, and so if I were to use that route, I would have meters to feet, and then I would have feet to miles. That's not going to help me, so I'm going to get rid of that for now. If I need to, I can come back to it. I can also have feet to inches, but notice that's going to take me from that many feet to inches. That's of no use. I don't want to end up with feet. I want to end up with meters. And so if I go over here to this column, then now I have yards to feet. So notice yards is what I want to start with. Feet is my connecting place, and meters is what I'll end with. And that's exactly what the question is wanting me to do. It's wanting me to go from yards to meters. So I can start with yards. Feet is going to connect to end up with meters. And so what I went ahead and did is I wrote those two conversion factors out for you at the top of the page. Ideally, you would have that conversion factor, that whole list, just physically in front of you. That way you don't have to go back and forth between one page or another. And so if you have that saved to your screen, that always helps. And so I want to start, and I'm just going to go with one conversion to another. It's just a straight 1 unit conversion. We're just starting with yards. We want to end with meters. And so the first thing I have to do is I have to start with my data. My data is 100 yards. I want to figure out how many meters that is. And so I want to get out of yards and into meters. So I know that since right now I could take any number and turn it into a fraction by just putting it over 1. Hopefully you're seeing right now that yards is in the numerator. So whatever your starting data is, that unit is always in the numerator because it's under this pretend invisible 1. So yards is in my numerator. That means that I want yards in my denominator so that those cancel out. So I'm going to take 1 yard equals 3 feet, and I'm going to turn it into a conversion factor that will have yards in the denominator, and that means feet in the numerator. So I now am going to say 3 feet over 1 yard. I could have also said 1 yard over 3 feet. So notice what I did there is that I put yards in the numerator and feet in the denominator. But if I use this one, it's not going to cancel out yards because I want yards in the denominator for this question. So instead, I'm going to use this conversion factor that I created. So I have 1 yards in the denominator, 3 feet in the numerator. So now watch my units. Yards in the numerator, yards in the denominator, they cancel each other out. I'm going to get rid of this invisible 1 just because it's not necessary. That was just to show you the fact that yards to begin with is in the numerator. So now I'm left with feet. If I were to take this and put it in my calculator or just do mental math, I would be left with units of feet. I don't want to figure out yards to feet. I want to figure out yards to meters. So I'm going to go and turn into my next proportionality statement, which is that 1 meter equals 3.28 feet. I have an option here. I could put 1 meter in the numerator and 3.28 feet in the denominator, or I could do the exact opposite. I could say 3.28 feet in the numerator and 1 meter in the denominator. And this is just a reminder that M stands for meter, MI stands for miles. So just be cautious of the abbreviations that you're using. Make sure you're following what the information given to you is saying. So I want feet, which is left here in the numerator, I want that to be in the denominator. That way they cancel. So I'm going to pick this conversion factor. So that gives me 3.28 feet in the denominator and 1 meter in the numerator. I'm going to go ahead and write out the entire word. So now if you look, feet in the numerator, feet in the denominator, they cancel out. I'm left with units of meters. I want units of meters. I'm done. Just as a reminder, every time that you're dealing with a conversion factor, it's a fraction. The numerator always represents multiplication. The denominator always represents division. So if you were to say any number, so let's pick 5. 5 times 1 is still 5. If you were to do 5 divided by 1, it's still 5. So if you have a 1 in the numerator, you can ignore it because you're still going to be left with the same final answer. If you have a 1 in the denominator, you can ignore it because you'll still be left with the same original value. So having a 1 in the numerator, a 1 in the denominator, you just skip it because it's not going to affect our calculation. So notice what's happened here. We have 3 in the numerator, so that means times 3. And then we have 3.28 in the denominator, so that means divided by 3.28. You're not going to do anything with this 1 yards or this 1 meter. You're not going to do anything with that in your calculator because it's not going to affect it. Saying divided by 1 or saying times 1 doesn't affect your calculation. So now you can go to your calculator and you're going to go through this by saying 100 times 3 divided by 3.28. And your calculator should stare back at you with a pretty long decimal. You're going to get 91.463. Now we have to do sig figs. Remember, that is always the very last step that you take. You don't ever do more than 1 round of sig figs. So you go to your data. Your data in this question was 100 yards. 100, no decimal point, that's 1 significant figure. So you go back over here to your calculation answer. The 9 is your only first significant figure. The 1 does not bump up the 9, so that means it becomes a 0 and everyone else that's behind it could become a 0 placeholder as well. So your final answer is just 90. 90, no decimal point, and you did all this work to finish with your unit. You need to make sure you write either M or the word meter. And this right here, 90 meters, no decimal point, this is your final answer.